Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Optimizing Your Success, hosted by the Mentor Project. I have my great high achieving friends here today, as well as two really special guests who are experts in workplace culture. And I am so happy that we have them here because I am really concerned that at the rate that we are going, we're going to be left without a workforce. We have so many people. We have half of millennials and 2/3 of the younger Gen Z who are leaving their jobs because of some sort of mental health challenge. If we don't do something about this now, we are really going to be left without a workforce. Our special guests today have over 10 years of research where they've collected information from over 1 million people. So I really want to dive into what they have to say, which is also in their book, Anxiety at Work, which you will see I have all tabbed out because it is so good. So first, we are going to do our special round of all of our really great high achievers who are here to help me out today, starting with Janice Lentz.
Hi, everyone. I'm Janice Lentz. I'm CEO of Hearing Access and Innovations, and I'm working to make the world accessible for people with hearing loss. I'm also traveling to every country in the world, and I've been to 194 countries, territories, and unrecognized nations.
Thanks, Janice. And for those who don't know, Janice is really on a crusade to make the world better for those with hearing access and for those who need the extra hearing access. So all of the subway platforms, New York City taxis, national parks, Broadway theaters, museums, it is all thanks to her diligent efforts because she stops at nothing to get this done. So thanks, Janice.
Thanks, Ruth.
My favorite award-winning photographer, Susie Katz.
I am thrilled to be here, as always. I am a photographer, and I haven't been to as many countries as Janice, but I photographed in over 70. I've been spending the past decade or so on my educational nonprofit Photo Wings, where we work across cultures, generations, and disciplines to help people utilize the skills that the best photographers in the world excel at.
Thanks, Susie. And go check out her webpage because it has some of the most exquisite colors you didn't even know existed. Dr. Bruce Y. Lee.
Yes, thanks, Ruth. I am celebrating National Cherry Cobbler Day. This is not actual size. I'm also celebrating National Pack Rat Day, but you don't want to see that background. I'm a professor. I also do AI in health, computer modeling. I'm a writer, a journalist, and I cover health and healthcare for Forbes.
So what he's kind of being really humble today. He is really our COVID expert who really knows everything about it. He has some of the most hysterical and widely read articles in Forbes. He's a physician. He also has an MBA, and we always give him a challenge every week because he writes so often for Forbes. When there's something obscure that comes up in our conversation, we challenge Bruce to somehow embed that word into a future Forbes article. Now, remember, he writes about science, so it's always creative. We had him write about hot dogs and tiaras. And, usually we have our Olympian here, Devin Harris, and he told us about speed suits. So we got the speed suits, or was it unitards that we got in last time? So we have to think, you have to put in the chat, put in what you think Bruce should write about in the next upcoming article. Dr. Allison Escalante.
Thanks, Ruth. I am so excited to be here today because, as you know, I'm all about anxiety. I believe that our current epidemic of anxiety is driven by a culture of criticism and perfectionism and anxiety that I call the should storm. We should do this, we should do that. We can never get it right. It's driving burnout both in parenting and in professional life. It's what I'm all about. I'm an adjunct professor of pediatrics. I am a full-time pediatrician. I write for Forbes on the science of human performance. I write for Psychology Today on this culture of anxiety. And I love Monday nights.
And we love having you. And go check out her TED Talk on the should storm. It's really good. All right, our apostle of appreciation, Chester. Welcome to the show.
Yeah,
Your color is orange, by the way.
Yes, love the color orange. Delighted to be here. You know, I'm a co-author of 14 books with my good friend and co-author Adrian Gostick. We write about corporate culture. We're passionate about anxiety at work for all the reasons everybody just mentioned. You know, it's causing burnout. It's causing people to leave their jobs early. It's one of those things people don't talk about, and they should, because they're embarrassed. They think it makes them feel weak. We've been to a lot of countries, but really my goal is to visit every diner in New Jersey. I've been to 34 so far. And let me tell you, when you can get waffles 24/7, life is good.
There's got to be a silver lining there. And I'm curious to hear about, so I read this and I'm really excited to really take a deep dive into some of your findings and what some of the things that we can do to make sure that we really don't have that toxic workplace, which has really creeped up over the years. So,
right. And Adrian Gostick is going to expound on that, because in our writing partnership, I want to make it very clear, Adrian is the brilliant writer. So you saved the best for last.
I was just going in alphabetical order, but thanks. Adrian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Ruth. Thanks for having us on. And what a esteemed panel we have today. Speaking about anxiety, you know, I don't think I've ever done a session in my home office at 6 o'clock. So right behind me, the sun is coming in. It makes me kind of look like I'm, you know, kind of ethereal here. So normally I'm much more substantial, but not today.
It's a halo. It's a halo.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, tell us your story. Tell us a little bit about your background.
You know, for 20 years, Chester and I, we've been writing, we've been researching, working with organizations on their culture, on their employee engagement. And this is something for the last couple of years. We began this book a couple of years ago when we noticed the sort of rising anxiety levels. And as you know, not a lot of people were talking about it in business. No. It was still relatively taboo. And not until, in fact, the pandemic, if there was a silver lining, it was that we actually can now talk about our mental health at work. And if you noticed, Ruth, one of the co-author on the book here is my son, Anthony, who's 25. He's a brilliant genetics researcher. He's a very smart young man who has lived with anxiety all his life. And he brought some really interesting perspectives to us as oldies who don't really talk about mental health. We came up from the mindset of, rub some dirt on it, get back out there. And I just love what you said earlier, that we are not going to have a workforce if we can't start talking about this.
So how did you and Chester meet? Let's just start with that, because you're not even from the same neighborhood. So to speak.
Work release, right, Chess?
Adrian was in prison. I was his pen pal. Go ahead, Adrian.
Well, we began working at the same company about 20 years ago or so. And it's funny, I was hired as the VP of communications. I'd done investor relations, public relations. Got hired at this consultancy that focused in on employee recognition, employee engagement, and offering solutions there. And it's funny, we were about to go to a big conference with all the salespeople, and I had an employee who said, "Oh, by the way, when you're there," he says, "you got to meet this guy named Chester Elton." He says, "He'll change your life." And I had no idea. He had no idea how prescient he was. And so, we bumped into each other. Chester had an idea for a book, right?
Yeah, I had I told our CEO, I called him one day and I said, I was a sales manager, right? I had this sales territory in northern New Jersey. And I said, Kent, his name is Kent Murdoch. I said, Kent, if we became the thought leaders in employee recognition, my life would be so much easier, because people would call me instead of me having to cold call them. And thought leaders write the definitive book on the subject. And nobody's written a definitive book on employee recognition. We should write the book. And he goes, "That's a great idea. Go ahead and write it."
Love it.
And I said, I think you misunderstood that you should write the book and I should benefit. And Ken said, "You're a smart guy. Figure it out." So it's really interesting. For about a year, I played with a bunch of ideas, had these crushing quotas, very little time. And he called back and he said, "I've hired a writer. His name is Adrian Gostick. Introduce yourself, write the book." And almost a year to the day, right, Adrian? We found this little publisher in Layton, Utah that would take a flyer. It was their first business book they'd ever published called Managing with Carrots. That's why orange is my favorite color, our little mascot, Garrett the Carrot. And we sold 30,000 copies and we never looked back. So it was great fun. So serendipity, hard work, and finding a brilliant writer, all very key to writing good books.
So it sounds like the perfect pairing. Really sound like where one ends and the other begins. You don't even know.
Oh, we finish each other's sentences all the time. It's really scary.
Wow. Wow. All right, let's dive into this because you guys are the experts in workplace culture. And I always say all the C-suite, they come in with their brilliant strategies and, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right?
Right.
Doesn't work. What are we doing wrong?
I think right off the top, and this is such a worn out phrase, you really do have to put your people first. And in 20 years, we've looked at the best cultures in the world, and the leaders put their people first. They look to engage, enable, and energize their workforce. They have very simple things in place. They're great communicators. They don't leave things to chance. And it's really interesting, Ruth, the red thread, as is said, through all our work, as we've written about culture and recognition and teamwork and leadership and now anxiety, this red thread of gratitude is always there. That human touch, that we really do appreciate the work that people have done for us, that they believe what they do matters, that they make a difference. And when they make a difference, it's noticed and celebrated. Adrian, what would you add to that?
And it's interesting because you're talking, Ruth, about culture, and Chester started at the very macro level. And that's typically where we have to start when we begin. When we go in with an organization, typically we know, and you do too, when you go into an organization, there's some levers you can pull that will help immediately. Give people a voice, begin recognition programs, and things like that. But what we found in our work is that over the last 20 years or so, since we've all been so focused in on employee engagement levels really haven't moved that much.
Yeah.
Is there another sort of business idea that we just haven't been able to grasp, like engagement? And what we've realized over the last 4 or 5 years as we've worked with organizations, there are these levers you can pull that will immediately create some impact. But really, if you want to change engagement levels, you want to change culture, it's employee by employee. And it's hard work. That's why most leaders don't do this, is because the things that will drive our esteemed panel here, if I went by every one of us, we each have very different motivators. And that's where management is hard work. We have to get to know each person in our care. And that's why it really is a different skill set that requires a different ability than just, I'm the best engineer in the group, or I'm the best nurse. I should be a manager. Well, no, we should find people who can really tap into those individual drivers within each person. And that's hard work.
It's so interesting that you say that, Adrian, because I study extreme high achievers, and very often all of these recognition programs are made for the middle. Yeah. But the extreme high achievers are on the fringes. They're at the edge, and what works for the middle is not going to work for them. So that extra little 3% bonus, that's not cutting it. That's not cutting it for them. And for them, it's not even about the money, it's about other things. So I love that you say that you have to go person by person, or at the very least, I think, group by group. So take us through what you went through and the research that you did on those 1 million people and how it led to the strategies that you talk about in this book.
Our database now, like Chester mentioned, now 1 million people that we've surveyed for books like All In, which was a culture book. We did a book on motivation called What Motivates Me, and it was really around what those individual drivers are. We've had 100,000 people take what we call our motivators assessment, which was built by a team of psychologists and psychometricians. Really has led us to this work of anxiety at work, because what we're looking at is we're looking at those cultures that will build resilient employees. And that's hard because we're looking at cultures that will try and remove that uncertainty, that will allow people to have a voice, that will, as Chester mentioned, have greater amounts of gratitude, but that's very specific. And so we know that there's certain drivers of engagement, enablement, and energy levels. But it really comes down to this idea: are we removing those drivers they're creating angst within our people? We know from our data and others, Gallup has found this too, that about 70% of people's anxiety, they say, comes from their manager. That's sort of the immediate thing that I have to deal with. And can we bring that down? And are we thinking about what we're doing maybe that's creating that anxiety? Because 9 times out of 10, when Chester and I go into an organization, they want us to work with those people down there and get them to be more resilient, teach them habits, get them to have more sleep and to do things better, to be more organized. That's the wrong place to start, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I love what you said, Dr. Ruth, about the individual, the people on the fringes, right? Because we talk about that all the time. You got to manage to the one. Yeah. And, it always bothers us, right, Adrian, when these books come out and say, these are the 3 things that you got to do. And it works for everybody. Well, no, it doesn't. We've talked to people and said, well, how do you manage your anxiety? Say, well, I get my sleep, I eat well, and I exercise. I go, great, that works for you. It may not work for everybody. We had a wonderful case in the book of Chris Rainey, a friend of ours who hid his anxiety for decades from his family, from his business partner, his best friends. Finally, when he admitted that the reason he was lying about all these things that he couldn't do or why he wouldn't show up, he was completely embraced. His family, his friends, the people that he managed, once he admitted that he had this anxiety, they all said, me too. We've all dealt with it at some level, right? And we're very forgiving and embracing. And he said, after that, I haven't had another anxiety episode that's been debilitating. Now that worked for Chris. Yeah. And that's great. Now I don't want to, I want to be careful here, because then somebody will say, well, I told everybody I had anxiety and I'm still having attacks. And so I'm a double failure. Not the case for Chris. That worked great. And that was his, that was his remedy. We've talked to other people that have said, look, it doesn't matter if I don't get my sleep, I'm a wreck, right? Talk to other people, say, like, I've got to meditate, and I'll meditate in the morning and the mid-afternoon. So this idea of managing to the one really is important. And so we say to leaders in particular, that where the anxiety starts, right? Are you talking to your people one-on-one? And are you going from sympathy to empathy when you're dealing about it? Adrian and I, we laugh. We go, sympathy is when you call IT and you say, my computer's not working. And the guy says, bummer, dude. I'm glad I'm not you. Empathy is, where you really get down in that dark hole with your people and you become vulnerable and you say, hey, I may not know exactly what you're going through. I have been here too. Yeah. What can we do together to lift you up? And I think that message, the one message that I think really is universal for employees that are suffering from anxiety, is that you're not alone.
Yes.
And as soon as you have that ally, as soon as you have someone that you can talk to, then you can figure out the remedy that works for you to bring you back, build that resilience, as Adrian talked about, and get stuff done, right?
I love that, because, going back to the high achievers, I always say it's not about the habits, right? You can't copy and paste somebody else's habits, because their life is different from your life, which is why, again, all of these books and all of these people that say, do this, it worked for Mark Cubitt. Well, it's not going to work for you, because you're very different, right? So what are some of the things that you think, let's start with the managers, that they should be doing in order to help with this problem? Since you say that's really the core of the problem. So are you saying the toxicity starts there?
Well, and again, a lot of managers don't really feel like they're toxic by any means. In fact,
of course
99% don't feel like they.
Of course.
And yet we find about a third of employees say my manager leads with fear. And in many cases, they don't do it purposefully. They, it's like, well, Bruce, if you don't get this done, I don't know that I can promise you, that you'll be around next year. Little subtle things that they may drop in, which are really not helpful at all. When you say, what can a manager do? We find first and foremost, especially in the middle of this pandemic, because we're still not out of it, is reduce as much uncertainty as you can, because that's what we're finding is the biggest problem right now is I don't know where we're going as an organization. Yeah. I don't know if I fit, and I don't know if I even have a future here. So very simple things I need to answer. And a lot of managers will tell us, well, we are uncertain right now. Yeah, but you can talk more than you have. Or we'll have people who say, well, no, we talked about this back in January. We had a big meeting. We outlined our strategy. Great. What have you done this week? Because this is a constant need where I'll fill in that vacuum with worry. So where are we going as an organization? Do I fit? Am I adding value? And do I have a future here? Answer those questions for me. That's a big step toward helping me feel like I'm going to bring my anxiety down around uncertainty.
It sounds like we're going right back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the one thing that we continually preach is if you think you're over communicating, it's probably about right. It's probably about right.
Right. So you're supposed to ask, is it you're supposed to ask yourself, or this is what you're supposed to tell people one-on-one in terms of what could I be doing? What are you not understanding? This is what we're planning. This is where we're going. What's the best way to do it? We're going to have a Zoom on, 4:00 Friday, or how should we do this?
It's that one-on-one touching base. And, we say, look, you can't address it head on, Hey, Ruth, are you suffering from anxiety? You'll get a call from HR pretty quickly. And what's our favorite quote, Adrian? Never in the history of the world has telling someone to calm down actually calm down anybody, right? So, So the idea is you just say, we teach managers to look for clues, changes in behavior that you may think is just a one-off if it starts to be repeated. People that aren't showing up on time, that are always very punctual. People that are maybe acting out that never acted out before, or all of a sudden reserved. Adrian talked about giving people a voice. Are you making sure that everyone's voice is heard? If you're on the Zoom call or if you are in person, are you making sure you're checking in with everybody? Allison, I haven't heard from you recently. I know you've got some thoughts on this. Anything to add? And then that one-on-one. How are you feeling today? Listen, I know that we're still struggling with in-person school for our kids and daycare and on. And I know there's a lot of pressures. If that's bothering you, feel free to talk to me about it. Been there, done that, happy to help. So that relationship becomes really important. As Adrian said, it's hard work. It always pays off in higher engagement, higher productivity, and lower turnover. What was the number, Adrian? 70% of millennials and Gen Z had left the workplace in the last, what was it?
Yeah, Ruth, you mentioned that. Yeah, it's half of millennials, 75% of Gen Zs have left for mental health reasons, left a job. And so that's frightening. And again, most of us are only beginning to talk about this in the workplace, which is, such a shame.
Yeah, one of the new anxiety things, obviously, that's coming up is, how do I go back to work? Yeah. So many people have gotten so comfortable. I mean, it's been over a year. Yeah. They're really comfortable with, getting up and wearing sweatpants and maybe a passable shirt, and being able to turn off the camera and, eat your smoothie or whatever. So this idea of the uncertainty of how am I going to go back to work? This hybrid, whatever you want to call it, the new normal, the future of work. Do I go in once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week?
And what's right for me may not be right for you.
Exactly.
So can we go through, you guys put together 8 strategies for dealing with the anxiety in the workplace and trying to create a healthier place for everyone to work. I want to go through those ideas, and if you guys can give us tips, tools, scripts, anything that you can think of. Okay. All right. So you wrote the first one is deal with uncertainty. So how do we do that?
And we have chatted a little bit about that, but one great example we had about uncertainty. We interviewed a pilot from the Thunderbirds, Nicole Malachowski, and it's the Air Force's squadron, and she gave us a really interesting analogy. She said, when you're in formation, like she says, we're upside down, we're 400 miles an hour, we're 18 inches apart from each other. She says, you inevitably hit turbulence. You hit turbulence every time you fly. She says, but when you're 18 inches from somebody, it gets dangerous. Yeah. And she says, first time I hit this, I grabbed onto the stick really tight because that's what we were taught to do in flight school. She says, we land, and the other pilots tell me, Nicole, we didn't tell you. She says, when we hit turbulence, we loosen our grip, 2 fingers on the stick. And it's really interesting. So as managers, we hit uncertain times like we're in. And what do? We tend to micromanage. We tend to over want to control because, my job's at stake and we have all this pressure. And so we tend to push that down onto our people. Her analogy is really powerful, is that we got to loosen our grip and trust our team in tough times. They really will take us through that if we allow it.
I love that. Bruce, I'm hoping that you can weigh in here because you lead a pretty big team and you've had a lot to do during the last year, both especially in the research front, and you are now managing your team remotely. So what's that been like? I mean, did you tend to want to micromanage, and did you micromanage? What was that like for you, Bruce? He's busy eating cherry cobbler.
Yeah, I was busy thinking about cherry cobbler and shift back to reality. And Adrian, you mentioned that that thing needed to get done, so I'll go get it done as soon as I finish my cherry cobbler. It's been interesting. I mean, I myself don't tend to be a micromanager. In fact, I don't like to micromanage. But there are times in which you actually, especially when you're working remotely, it can be challenging because you're trying to, you don't have that same sort of check-in process that you can have when everyone's in the same place, in the same center or the same location. So you have to make a little extra effort to communicate and to figure out what's going on and getting on the same page. But I think towing that line where you're not like micromanaging, but you're also trying to collect enough information so you can get a sense and be able to relate when you don't really see the person. I mean, you see the person on Zoom, but you don't see them right then and there. So trying to separate it from, I'm trying to find out what you're doing, to just like kind of let's communicate and let's try to figure out, what are you thinking? Do we have the same vision about what's going on? Taking that extra effort. It can be challenging to make sure that's not micromanaging, and also making sure that, you trust your team.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know anyone that wants to be micromanaged.
Yeah.
But I think there are definitely managers that's just their go-to MO is to do that. Have you ever found that you started doing that and then you had to pull back, or as Adrian said, loosen the grip?
I haven't had that issue because my inclination is not to micromanage. So sometimes I've had
Adrian said that 99% of managers said
that. but he's a fringe person. You already said he's on the fringe.
That's true. That's true. He's an extreme.
So I should say the opposite of what I actually mean, right? Yeah. So I actually had to. Sometimes I had to do the opposite because some folks on my team said, I really want you to check this. Yeah. Or can you, especially if people are like, by themselves, each person is by themselves within their house or their apartment. Yeah. They lose that natural check-in with other folks and to make sure they feel like they're doing the right thing. So I've actually found the opposite where people have said, can you check this? Can you, I really would like someone else to look at this. I would really like, and then also I think part of it is since people are separate, they also like that social interaction. So they want to talk to you and they want to discuss things. So it's actually been the opposite, trying to make sure I have to reach out to do those things.
Sounds like you have a healthy team, Bruce.
It's a great team. And I think, I always say that one of the keys is at the recruiting stage, you get the right team members and then you trust them.
Yeah.
Then you sort of, you trust them, and not only do you trust them, you sort of empower them and say, not sort of, you empower them. I shouldn't say sort of. But you empower them to let them run with it. So I would say like when I'm really careful is at the recruiting stage.
Love it. Love it. Adrian, Chester, anything to add?
I think it's so great. One thing we find that Bruce is saying that because you have these extremes with managers sometimes. Either you get the micromanager, the other time you have the laissez-faire, and especially we're finding younger employees who say, I need that. We do a lot of executive coaching, and it's really interesting as we do 360s with their people. We'll find the older employees kind of go, yeah, no, I'm okay, Bruce. I'm good. Check in with me once a month or once a week. But the younger people, it's really interesting how they'll say, I need more coaching. I need to know how I am doing. And what was interesting too, in our research, we found a lot of people saying, if I'm not getting that feedback, I'll keep doing things a different way until I finally get you to pay attention to me or to say that it's good. I mean, incredibly counterproductive.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Well, that just ties in so much with parenting and educational trends over the last 2 decades, right? So now we're seeing that in the workforce.
Yep. It's coming right back to us. All right. Number 2, balance an overwhelming workload. What are we going to do with that?
Yeah, again, this is, as Bruce has done great with his team, is you're checking in and say, sometimes because Bruce is so competent, we just keep piling on more and more work.
Yeah.
One of the executives that we've coached at the World Bank, just incredibly competent. And it was this, the duck syndrome that we talk about early in the book. I mean, she was always calm, always competent, always got everything done. And they would just keep piling on her more and more and more. And she'd say, whoa, wait a minute. They go, oh, you always say that, and yet you always get it done. Well, you've got to be sensitive to those kinds of things. And as we were coaching her up, I mean, here she's got 2 young kids. She's a working mom. She was getting an advanced degree at Georgetown. She's, working at the World Bank. And so finally, it was really interesting that she would accept the workload with parameters. And this is what was really great, is you set up parameters.
Oh, tell me about that.
She would say, look, on our team, it's no meeting Fridays. Like, we work like dogs Monday through Thursday. Now, again, this worked for her team.
Right.
He said, no, Friday is the day that you catch up. We all catch up on all the stuff that's been piling up. There are obviously going to be the rare exceptions. And she's really maniacal about this, no emails over the weekend. Nobody works on the weekend. You take your Saturday, your Sunday, you refresh. We hit it hard Monday. And it was really interesting. She got some pushback from senior management. She said, your team needs to get a lot done. She goes, trust me on this. My people need the rest. I need them refreshed. And productivity went up. So it's really great when you set those parameters and you check in with your team. Who am I just piling stuff on? Because they're so competent. Yeah. And where do we need to spread that around? And again, as Bruce has done, he's not micromanaging. He is checking in and making sure he knows what's going on and when it needs to be doing. And
I think you can ask anyone here on this panel, and they can tell you the story. If you want something done, you give it to a busy person to do, because they don't have time to make excuses. They don't have time to waste. So they keep doing it and saying yes to everything, thinking it's going to help. But then it just leads to not good stuff. Allison, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. This is clearly your wheelhouse.
I don't know. So many thoughts. I'm still grooving on the whole, younger employees looking for real-time feedback. This came up at dinner the other night because my husband and I are both macro thinkers, absolutely want our team to be like, I want you to be good at your job so I don't have to think about your job, right? Like, and then you do your job and I do my job. And one of my husband's direct reports, who's newer, is asking him for more structure, which made me giggle a little. I'm like, oh, that's going to be fun, right? Like, but I just, one of the things that is coming up a lot in discussions on creativity and innovation right now is the value of real-time feedback. And so if you've got people who are willing to try things, I mean, that's incredible, right? So there's 2 things there. One, it's a huge waste of time and effort to be doing things differently all the time to try to get your boss's attention just because you're looking for that feedback. On the other hand, that's incredible. That's so adaptable that they would be willing to just try so many different things, right? And if you've got someone doing that and you can notice that, what an amazing talent to harness. But I'm taking that home as like, better give that real-time feedback. for us, I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and for us, the feedback you got was your grade and, your paycheck. And we are raising, we're now into the second generation that we're raising with constant feedback. And it's a confusing mixture of praise and blame that really puts people on edge and makes them very anxious. Kids today are tested in extreme ways from the youngest ages. So, super high pressure time tests starting in kindergarten. And this kind of assessment is going to, it inevitably will have people looking for constant assessments, and also feeling probably even more insecure than we did. So I just think it's really interesting.
I'm wondering, because as we're talking about the Gen Z and the millennials, at the very least, the younger millennials, they all grew up with social media, which is instant feedback all day long.
Right.
So this is what they grew up with. The Gen X and whatever comes before that, I don't even know what it's called. We didn't have that. We didn't have that constant feedback. We didn't have this try different things, throw spaghetti at the wall, hope something will stick, get this feedback every 2 seconds, somebody likes it. And, you can set alerts so that every time somebody likes or comments, you get a pop-up, right? So this is what they're used to. This is their normal, which is, and I'm curious now, Adrian, Chester, what you think. This is their normal, but their managers who are from a different generation, this is not their normal.
And
so we have a gap.
We interviewed dozens of younger people as we wrote the book too. And what we found was really interesting is exactly what you're saying about social media. It's very predictable. If I keep posting and I could start building up a following, I start getting more likes I know how to work this. And again, it creates tremendous amounts of anxiety as people compare themselves to others. We understand that. But the thing with this, it's really predictable social media, but then they come into the workplace and it doesn't work that way. Yeah. I work hard, but it doesn't seem to make any difference. They tell us, I don't have the security. I don't know how this works because they were promised, there's all these good jobs. Go to college, you'll get a good job. They go, there's not good jobs. There's like these few little good jobs. And then everybody else has all this anxiety and they're sharing it with each other. It's a tremendously anxiety-producing time. And so, there's a lot that's been written. I was just reading recently on, I think it was Vanity Fair, writing about this idea that the millennial promise never really panned out. They're not able to get houses. They're waiting 5 to 7 years longer to get married. Just as long or longer to get houses. They're leasing cars versus buying. It's a very different mindset that we have to be aware of.
I have a question. Well, I guess maybe I'm missing something. And maybe it's because I work in a large portion in the advocacy world. So to get people to work for free, you have to really motivate them. You have to work much harder to motivate people. It's not that hard to tell people when they're doing a good job to do it. You're doing a great job. And so I tell people all the time, and I regularly give people feedback because I want them to continue to work for me and put in extra effort. And I need them to work super hard because they're not getting paid. So,
what a fascinating thought.
You know what? So I'm listening to this, and to me, this is just the oddest thing because every time someone works on a project and it doesn't come out right and they aren't successful, I'm always giving feedback. Okay, let's try this. What do you think about this? So I'm always giving feedback, and I don't really understand why it doesn't take much work to give feedback to people.
Yeah, Janice, you've hit on something, and Adrian and I agree 100%. It's not that hard, It's common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense.
Unfortunately, is uncommonly practiced.
Oh, well, I don't know. I don't really understand because, I work with various groups of people, and they come back to me and we work on things, and sometimes it doesn't, and okay, it didn't work, so let's try something else, and that's a great job for trying. I'm always giving feedback.
And by the way, Janice, if everybody was like you, we wouldn't have a job. So we'd bless your heart for what you do.
Janice, I think the reason that former presidents of the United States know you by name and congressmen and senators know you by name is because you actually,
not always positively, by the way.
Not always positively, but you, even when it didn't go your way, you showed gratitude and you were kind about it. And I think it is so uncommon that it actually stands out.
I just keep thinking, though, that the connection between Janice's question comes right back to what you guys said at the beginning, right? We put effort in based on where our focus is. So if our focus is outcomes, right? Because, you know, the older managers, that was it. My feelings don't matter. Suck it up, buttercup, put your head down, work hard, and get some good outcomes, right? And so if that's my goal, if that's what I'm looking at, it takes extra energy to shift your attention to something that's off goal. Oh, right. And I gotta encourage my people, right? Whereas if you can reset that goal and say people first, then outcomes, right? Because people are the engine of the outcomes. Suddenly your goals and your focus are aligned.
I think so much of it is getting the right people put in a position where they can succeed, that they have the right skills and the passion to go the same direction that everyone else does. We work collaboratively quite a bit, and we're very careful with the people that we partner with and that we work with, and we all meet and to see what kind of ideas that each one of us can bring to that idea that we can add. What my late husband used to say, 1 and 1 makes 3, but you have to get the right people. And I've been around people that are totally on a different page, and it's just better to make sure that you're working with people who have common goals and are open and honest, have integrity, and somebody you can trust and feel good around to make a nourishing environment.
Well, and this comes back to early on where we talked about, do you know their key motivators?
Yeah.
You know, what is it? You know, I'd be willing to bet, Janice, that, you know, the people that you're encouraging and valuing and expressing those, you know, instances of gratitude, they've got a high level of service and purpose, you know, and you're not, you know, that attracts the right people. And Susie, you know, in the creative part, you know, you talk about these are the attributes. Bruce, you said, hey, hiring is everything. You know, get the right people, and hire them. You know, that one-on-one relationship, that understanding that, you know, it's like my father used to say, Chester, never forget, there's nobody like you. You are singularly unique, just like everybody else. Don't forget, right? And know their stories, put them where they can succeed, encourage them with their passions, and things go better. And we agree 100%, Janice. Saying thank you, not that hard.
And I say thank you even when it doesn't go my way. I mean, I actually wrote an article about that in Redbook, where even if I don't win and I don't get it, I still say thank you, because first off, by saying thank you, people remember you said thank you. And so like today I spoke with someone, and I'm really fast on sending the thank you notes, because I also use the thank you notes to sum up what the call. And I find that it's people are just constantly shocked to receive a thank you note.
Yes.
Or a thank you email, or a thank you, just saying the word thank you, it seems to be like just shocking to people. But I think it's personally odd, because it doesn't take like, I work with these incredible people. And so I like to keep people up to speed on understanding the outcome of their direct effort. Like one of the people I work with is an editor, and she edits my articles. And so when it's published, I always make sure to send the published article to her to let her know the impact of it. If we work on legislation and someone helped me, I revert back to them, letting them know what their impact on it. Because if I'm then going to want to go back to them for help, if they don't think it made a difference, they're never going to help me. But I think that's part of why people return my phone calls, because I let them know the direct impact of their work.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we've jumped ahead to strategy number 8.
Yes,
which is, you know, gratitude. How you can see how that reduces people's anxiety. They never wonder when they're working for you, Janice, did they make a difference? Was their effort valued? And that reduces a lot of anxiety. As Adrian said before, you know, when there's that communication gap, you know, the old saying, no news is good news. That doesn't work. That's not true. You know, no news means horror and and anxiety.
Our mind goes to very scary places.
Absolutely. When I know I'm valued, when I know my work mattered, even when I made a mistake, boy, my anxiety goes down because I know I have a place. I've been seen. I've been heard.
Yeah.
One thing that I should add that Janice is an exceptional person. So we always joke.
Oh, you're just so nice.
Well, I'm just being truthful and factual. Whenever we collectively have a challenge or something that we talk about, we always joke like, "What would Janice do?"
That's right.
Like she's the ultimate problem solver. But I think
trust me, some of the people today did not feel that way when I was terrorizing them.
But
get it done.
One of the things about Janice, I think, is clear. Like, is she actually really cares about solving the problems and getting things done? And during my time in the when I worked in the corporate world, and I also worked in different settings in medicine, I encountered a lot of managers or leaders who you didn't feel like they actually cared about you at all. Yeah. Like there was they were more interested in kind of whatever political agenda there was, or moving up, or things like that. And I remember there were people that I worked with or under that didn't even know my name, and my name is not that hard to remember.
I'd say.
So like when you get that sense, then you're like, you shrug. So I think that gratitude thing is so key, because like people can tell when you actually care about them. Yeah. People are smart. Like they, it's hard to, what's the word it's hard to fake sincerity. Yeah. You know how they always say, "Oh, once you can fake sincerity, you've got it made." Well, I think it's actually the opposite. So
that's right. Yeah, well said, David. Yeah. That's great.
I just want to piggyback on what Brent just said.
So, guys, we have a lot more to go through. We're not going to get through all of them in our allotted time, but there's a few I really want to touch on, because I think, look, if everyone who's watching now, or will be listening on the podcast, if they can just take one or two of these and really think about it and let it marinate, and then start going into action, I think you're going to see this enormous shift in your reduced levels of stress, both for yourself and for your team. So I do want to touch on a few more, because we've already touched on dealing with uncertainty and balancing an overwhelming workload, and we talked about gratitude. I want to talk about managing perfectionism, because I feel perfectionism is a moving target. You'll never get there. You will absolutely never get there. And what's the ugly cousin of perfectionism? Procrastination.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So, and that's what we found. Yeah, no doubt, Ruth. And you study this. You know, as somebody who deals in mental health, you understand this challenge. The trouble is, back in the day when I was in college, we were actually told, use this as the answer on that ubiquitous job interview question. What's your biggest flaw? Well, I'm a perfectionist, right?
Yes, that's right.
I'm really hard on myself.
I'm just a workaholic. Like there's workahol. So you got to realize that as you said, there's a definite difference. We find a huge link between perfectionism and procrastination. What we're looking for are people who are healthy strivers. But the trick is understanding when good enough is. And most of our people will need to have help with this, because we're seeing an amazing amount of perfectionism, especially in younger people, where I don't want to get started, because if it's not going to be perfect, why bother? And they hold themselves to incredibly high standards. Chester and I just did about a week ago, we did a session with a big hospital system. And it was interesting how this idea was the number one thing. And we'd think, well, in healthcare, and we've got several people on the panel who've worked in healthcare, you'd think this is a place where we need perfectionism. And one of the nursing supervisors said, no. I got to teach my people to just get stuff done. You just got to keep moving in healthcare. And Dr. Allison, you're nodding your head there.
Yeah, you know this from the work you do, but look, we don't want to make mistakes in healthcare. But when you look at how people really perform, the more focused you are on getting it perfect, the more you make yourself prone to mistakes. because it raises the anxiety and you lose track of the big picture, and too much anxiety and perfectionism shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain that actually allows you to organize and do your job well. So it was funny how important for me as a doctor it was to really start to let go of worrying about avoiding mistakes, which is weird because I work really hard to avoid mistakes. I don't know how to put this into the right words, but focusing on mistake avoidance leads to more mistakes. Focusing on the work and engaging with the people and the healing work, you still end up being conscientious, but you are less prone to mistakes, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think one of the big lessons we learned around the perfectionism piece is that to make mistakes and to be flawed is very human.
Yeah.
Right. We start the chapter off with a wonderful Egyptian proverb that anything beautiful is never perfect.
That's right.
And Susie, you'd know this being the creative, some of the most creative things always have flaws. You look at the Mona Lisa, it has a flaw. You look at the sculpture of David, there are huge flaws. Mm-hmm. And yet that's what makes it human. And that's what we love about other people is their imperfections. Somehow when it comes to us, though, all bets are off and everything we say has to be right. Every project has to be perfect. So this idea of perfectionism, as Adrian said, we want diligent strivers that get a lot done at a level that's acceptable. That's because right. Dr. Allison, you said it perfectly. The opposite of perfectionism is or what it leads to is procrastination. If I can't do it perfectly, I won't even start.
That's right.
And sometimes that's limiting. Because if you're working so hard to be perfect, then you're not exploring other opportunities that might be even better, particularly in this ever-changing world.
Yeah, what's the old expression? The masterpiece is in the mess.
That's right.
When it gets messy, that's when it starts to get really good. Now, I will admit that of the two of us, Adrian makes a lot fewer mistakes. In fact, I remember, Adrian, it was back, I think it was in 1989. You thought you'd made a mistake. And you were wrong. Yeah. So, but you do have managers that are that way, right? They always have to be the smartest person in the room. They always have to be right on everything.
Oh, yeah.
And boy, I'm sure you could all chime in all the work that you do. Does that ever shut down creativity, right?
Yep. And
progression and innovation?
Susie, I think one of my favorite stories of yours, and I don't remember if it was in your TED Talk, but the Taj Mahal, right? We've seen those pictures 1,000 times, and we've seen it at sunrise, and we've seen it at sunset, and we've seen it at the middle of the day. And if you were looking for that perfect shot, which thousands of other people have done, you never would have gotten your shot of the Taj Mahal, which I think is the closest thing to perfection I have ever seen. Susie, tell us about that picture, because I think that's incredible.
Well, they say luck is when preparation and opportunity meet. And to try to make something that was a little bit different, I did a lot of research on what has everybody else done, and what might I do that's a little different. And a lot of this perfectionism comes down to having done your homework and to talk to a lot of people to find different ways to do it. So in that case, I had looked at postcards, I had looked at a lot of books, and I asked around for where might I get a different angle. And it so happened that if I went up to the Red Fort, which I had to do, I had to find out what time would be the best, what the weather would be good, how do I get there? And it turned out to be a magical morning of going through the streets of Agra, and with one of my best experiences of my life to get to the Red Fort. And then I happened to get lucky with a fabulous sunset. And nowadays there isn't even water in the river below, and I got lucky, but I helped myself to get lucky. And in terms of perfectionism, the more you can do all of that, the better, the easier it's going to be to get to where you're going.
I love that. All right. I want to talk about one other one, and then we're going to have to wrap up, which I think is so critical. And let's talk about how we're doing it when everyone is separated physically, which is building social bonds. which I think is so critical because we spend more hours at work than we do at home when we're physically there. So how do we do that, and what role does that play with reducing the anxiety at work?
Go ahead, Jess.
Oh, the social bonds. I mean, Gallup has done brilliant work on this, that the most engaged and productive employees have a best friend at work. And having that network, we even talk about, having an ally at work, someone you can depend on. So often, and this goes back to, elementary school when we were maybe the last one picked for the baseball team or whatever it was, that a lot of people will feel like the other at work. Yeah. Whether you're the only woman on the team, the only LGBTQ plus on the team, the only Muslim on the team, the only, one where English is your second language kind of thing. And this idea of those social bonds, I'll tell you, we've gone through a really interesting experiment in our leadership groups that you're a part of, Ruth, where we do these connection episodes where everyone tells their story. Once you know someone's story, it's a whole different ballgame. It really is. It helps you navigate through a lot of things. It helps you understand a lot of things. And that idea of having a social bond, people that you can trust, people that know you, that trust you, and that care about you. I'm always amazed. We do these connect groups where you'll put 7 or 8 random people together for 7 or 8 weeks, and each one tells their story. And I'm telling you, at the end of that, you're fast friends.
Yeah.
Because you've got that connection. There's a social bond over and above how do we get the work done. We care about each other. There's a network. I can depend on you. I can trust you because I know you care about me. Why? Because you know my story.
That's right. Allison, I want to hear what you have to say about this.
I have a quick comment. Really interesting that you use the example of not getting picked or not getting picked for the team in gym class. What's happening there is we had to earn our way onto the team, right? And we learned how awful it was to get picked last. I was always picked last until I got coordinated later in high school. And then you'll do anything to make sure later in your life that you're not picked last. But that's gone. They don't get picked that way in gym class anymore because frankly, it was horrible. So now the gym teachers assign the teams, right? So think about what that leads to. Now we have younger employees who are looking for their leader to be creating those groups, welcoming them into the team, right? They're not going to be scrapping to get on the team. They're going to be looking for us to take that initiative.
Oh, interesting. Waiting. Wow. It's interesting. I spoke to Steve Kerr, who's the head coach of the Warriors, the NBA team. And he said, when you put a team together, you have some senior people, mid people, and the very junior people. And he said, everyone is working so hard because the 15th player, the last one, is trying to keep his job and working really hard just to keep his job, even if it's at the bench, right? Working really hard. The top player is working really hard to keep his number 1 spot. So it's not that they're competing with each other as much as they're competing for where they are. So that's why they work so well together. And that's why what he's talking about when you put the groups where you have very senior, mid-career, and the junior people, that's really how it meshes the best, which I found fascinating. Because we don't do that in the workplace at all. You get who you get.
That's right? That's been one of the interesting things about Zoom. We've done some things virtually with our partners that typically are we meet physically. And some of these breakout rooms have been fascinating. You're getting to know people you may never have met under any other circumstances. And we've also had partnerships where an older generation and a younger generation get together and each bring in photos they think would be of interest to the other. And they get to know one another in a whole different way. So rather than just going toward the person to your left or the person to your right, just be more observant and give yourself more opportunities.
I love that. And if you think about our motley crew, right? We get together virtually every Saturday night. We couldn't be more different, right? We could not be more different. We're from different places, different backgrounds, different everything. And yet somehow it just all worked perfectly. Wow. So with that, and I love our social bond, and I agree. I think we really learn to gel together, to trust each other. And at the end of the day, people like to work with people who they know, like, and trust.
Mhm.
So we need to be able to do that with each other. And look, Chester's the apostle of appreciation. If you ever check out his LinkedIn profile, every day there's a photo of something that he has gratitude for, which is, it always puts a smile on my face. And Adrian, I love that you did that. And I love that you brought your son into this as well. So I really think this is, a lot of gratitude goes to both of you for doing that. Guys, thank you for spending your Monday night with us. This has been great. We can talk about this all night long. I mean, we only got to half the list. So I really recommend that people check out Anxiety at Work by Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton. Everyone, we're going to say how you can hear more about our fabulous panelists, starting with Janice Lentz.
Hi, you can, this was really, really fascinating. And you can find me at janicelentz.com, or for my advocacy work and my consulting work, hearingaccess.com, and of course, LinkedIn.
Thanks, Janice. Susie.
Hi, well, you can find me and my work at photowings, photowings.org. And I made a video on the Mentor Project, of which I am part of. And you can find some of my own work there in addition to PhotoWings. Or you can go to susankatzphotography.com.
Thanks, Susie.
Thank you for having me.
Dr. Bruce Wiley.
So thanks, Ruth, for cobbling together this panel.
Oh,
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
I have 5 more of them, but I won't continue. You can reach me at brucewiley.com, or you can Google Bruce Y. Lee, or if you want to read my stuff for Forbes, Bruce Wiley Forbes, Google that. And on social, I'm at Bruce_Y_Lee.
Hey, Bruce, we need to give you a word to use in a Forbes article.
I'm game.
I think it has to be gratitude.
That's
Do you guys have another idea?
That's
an
easy.
easy one. We need a harder one.
Epithelial.
That will not be hard for Bruce.
I wouldn't even know how to spell that one.
All right, you guys have about 45 seconds to come up with another word. Dr. Allison Escalante.
Yeah, you can find me at AllisonEscalante.com. That's Allison with 1 L, or shouldStorm.com. And that links to all my articles and all my socials.
Thank you. Reverse alphabetical order. Adrian.
Well, thanks again, Ruth, for having us on. This has been a delight, an amazing panel. You can check out a little bit more about anxiety at work at anxietyatworkbook.com. Get our own website, or gostickandelton.com, or link with us on LinkedIn.
Gostick and Elton sounds like it should either be an apparel brand or a musical group. I'm not sure which. Grand Ole Opry musical group.
Yeah, we thought we'd give Lennon and McCartney a run for their money. Gostick and Elton. Yeah, I would also add to that. Check out Adrian's articles on Forbes. I think they're brilliant. Sign up for our gratitude journal on LinkedIn and follow us there. We're constantly posting about anxiety and gratitude and culture.
Chester, where can people find out about you?
GostickandElton.com and LinkedIn. The gratitude journal is something that we publish twice a month, and we've gotten great traction on that. We're really proud of that work. And I would just say again, anxietyatworkbook.com. Lots of great stuff there. And just in closing, yes, and buy our book at fine bookstores everywhere. Amazon.com, Anxiety at Work. If I haven't mentioned it, buy the book, Anxiety at Work. And, I think just in parting, we'd really like to thank you for giving us your platform to get the word out around this just incredibly important subject. And I hope the message that people are listening to is that you're not alone. There are a lot of resources. You don't need to suffer alone. People will be your ally. They will come to your aid if you simply ask.
Yes, I agree with that. Chester, Adrian, thank you so much. On behalf of the Mentor Project and Dr. Debbie Heiser, who is behind the scenes, go check out the Mentor Project. If you are listening to us on the podcast, be sure to leave us a rating and review. We definitely check that out, and it helps people find us. My name is Dr. Ruth Gotian. You can find me at ruthgotian.com. All of the social media, it's just my name. Check out the article that I wrote out on the book on anxiety at work and Chester and Adrian's work. You can find that in Psychology Today, and you will see it in the comments section of the video footage for today. And if you want to check out every Tuesday, there's a Forbes article that I write. And tomorrow I talk with the trainer for Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and find out about the theory for winning. So go check that out tomorrow morning at Forbes. On behalf of everyone here, thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.